What's going on, folks? It's that time of the day, and I'm back live. This is Ichabod. I'm your host, Be Good, and today we are talking about something I've always wanted to dive into, the hiddenness of God. And we're going to try to tease out whether or not it's true what the biblical authors try to convince us of, something to the effect of God is glorious and God wants to be glorified, and that everything that you see happening around you in your life is part of God's grand scheme to glorify himself. So we're going to be talking about that today. Come on into the chat. And as we like to say, greet somebody in reason's name as we get ready to dive into this issue here. And as always, y'all let me know what's happening with the technology. I had issues with the mic yesterday. And so if you hear something that sounds a little funky, let me know in the chat and I'll try to get it worked out ASAP. But if it's sounding good, just give me a thumbs up. Let me know that we rocking. Matter of fact, you can do that from time to time, because as I'm doing this live, I'm also thinking in my mind, because you guys are getting this delayed. There's a 20-second delay between what I'm doing and what you're seeing and hearing. So if I'm talking in the back of my mind, I'm also wondering, are they hearing me clearly? So if you ever have a moment and you feel like you can do it, feel free to just put a little thumbs up in the chat. That way I can let that part of my mind that's worrying about how it's coming across, I can appease that part of me and keep going. That's one way that you can help out as we're doing this. Thanks a lot, Tranview and Henry Mars. Appreciate that. We give a shout out to some folks who, you know who they are. These are the Patreon supporters. And as you can see, the list is growing of people who say, hey, I just want to support. I just want to jump on board and let you know I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate your appreciation. And so whatever you're able to contribute, the Patreon is $5 for Ichabodians, and then $10 for Ichathans. So come on and join the squad. We got folks who are actually even giving more than that, and I definitely appreciate you. I know there's a lot. It's almost like with your cable providers and all that. You're paying for all these different apps and whatnot, and then you jump online and everybody's saying, hey, can you support me here? Can you support me there? So you putting your money where your mouth is putting your money where your mouth is definitely appreciated, because I know what that's like. I support folks all the time. And so we're kind of just passing it along. But it lets me know that this is valuable to you. Aside from that, I want to read something. This actually rocked me. My sister, I have two sisters. One, Ty, she's on TikTok, and she speaks out a lot about her former faith and things. And then the younger of my two sisters, Sha, she's not vocal online. She never was really into the Christian faith, even though she tried to be as a young person. But she says, I could never really get with it. On yesterday's episode, where I was deconstructing the lines from my song, The Incredible Walk, she made a comment, and sometimes I forget that I'm not the only wordsmith. I'm not the only artist in the family. So if you can't see it, I'll read it for you. She jumped in the chat and she talked about how she used to see her faith. And then she dropped some bars. And I was like, you know what? This is apropos. I'm going to read these bars from my sister. First, she says some other things. But then she said, talking about the religion that we grew up under, Christianity, she says, I saw this as capped from an early age, but went against my better judgment and tried to believe. I literally had to turn my brain off, mute myself. She says, this ish is mad damaging and takes time to unlearn and heal. In real life, when people break you down, tell you to worship them, and convince you to give them your bread so they can bless you with the crumbs, that's called pimps. So that's already bars, right? In real life, she says, when people break you down and convince you to worship them and give them your bread so they can bless you with crumbs, they're called pimps. And then she says, to quote myself, these are some bars she spit. I don't know if this is a rap or if this is spoken word, but she says, I need things to make sense. So I'm incensed by teachings that abandon thinking and accept the divinity of genocide and bigotry. And all religions are false except the one sect of set traditions and history. Miss me with the mystery. Post benediction, this black sheep strays from the fiction and fable. Also, as a woman, I'm not able to rock with a doctrine that feels like you're locked in, less of a flock and more of a stable. Sorry, I butchered the way that those bars were supposed to flow, but you can see how she's putting that together there. So I definitely appreciate my sister chiming in and letting us know how she feels. So then we dive into today's topic, the hiddenness of God. That was the biggest thing for me. It wasn't the problem of evil, even though that's a problem when you're thinking about a good God. And then you have theodicy, which is the Christian's way to try to make God still try to justify God's goodness in the face of all the evil and suffering in the world. That was a problem, but not the biggest problem. For me, I had two big problems. One was the Bible itself, its contradictory nature, its incoherent nature, the fact that it's not consistent or does not correspond to observable reality. That was a problem. But then on top of that, it was the hiddenness of God. How are we supposed to reconcile this God who supposedly wants to be known, wants to be loved, wants to be worshiped, with this drawn back, seek me and while you might find me kind of Acts, I think it was Acts 17, Mars Hill, Paul says that the God who made from one man all nations, this same God is the one who put everybody where they live, all the different places and times, in hopes that each person would grope for, seek for God, and perhaps, not definitely, but perhaps find God, though he's not far from each of us. So the scriptures are admitting that God is playing this hide and seek game. He's hiding himself, putting you in all these different places, you as humanity, in the hopes that you might perhaps find him. That just seemed like cap to me at some point. Back when I was one of the people who thought I had found God, I was happy that his scheme had worked. He hid himself and put us in all these places like an Easter egg hunt. And some of us have found him. And because I was one of the ones who found him, I was like, yay, it worked. I didn't have the empathy to think about, what about all these other people who don't find him? When I began to unbelieve, I revisited that, and it was no longer yay, it was ill. Like, what? This is what you're doing? So I would like you in the chat. I'm gonna give you a second in the chat. Talk to me. How big a problem for you was the hiddenness of God? The fact that God says he wants to be known, and people are seeking, and yet people are not finding the God that you believe they need to find if they're going to be eternally secure. On a scale of 1 to 10, how big a problem was the hiddenness of God for you? Throw it in a live chat, but if you're not watching this live, drop a comment. How big of a problem was it for you? And I'll give you a second to throw that in. Meanwhile, checking these comments out here. What's up, James? Great to see you, my man. Thanks for sliding through. He says, look at the trees. That's the argument. Indeed. How big a problem was it for you? So for me, I'll read your comments in a second. For me, it was about a 10. Not all the while I was a believer, but as I began to deconstruct, it made me say, this just Mars Hill Act 17, this just sounds like the kind of thing you would have to say if you're trying to come up with excuses for why we don't all find the God who wants to be found. And it began to sound like Cap. Elvis Butler, what's up, man, says, at the time, it wasn't a problem, just like me. It added to the whole I'm special and God works through me type of thing, which just fed into the Christian narcissism. Damn, that's a great point. If God is hidden, yet he's revealed himself to me, and I was one of the ones, either I was smart enough or lucky enough or graced enough or something enough to have found this God, and then this God's going to work through me to reach all of them. Yes, that does add into this idea, like the Christian narcissism that builds your ego. God's going to use me. I feel that. Tranview says it was a 3. I was content on the earnest seeking to show myself approved, then blame myself when I couldn't. Wow, that's the other side of the coin. So it's not just God's hidden and we've got to seek him, and lucky for us if we find him. It also is woe to us, like we be damned if we don't find him. It's not God's fault, because the scripture says, even though he's not far from each of us. So Tranview says, yo, I was blaming myself when those instances where I couldn't find him. And then you got, there's the poster that used to hang in my house when I was a kid. I think the poster that says, you have the 2 sets of footprints in the sand. I used to blame God. How come on these hardest times of my life, on the good times, there were 2 sets of footprints. On the hard times, God, there was 1 set of footprints. How come you left me? And then you have somebody speaking for God, as people always have to do. Somebody speaking for God, responding, saying, my child, in those times when you see 1 set of footprints, it wasn't yours. Those were the times when I was carrying you. So you're blaming yourself, saying, oh no, when I couldn't find God, it wasn't his fault, it was my fault. You deconvert, and then you realize, man, it wasn't my fault. Though that 1 set of footprints in the sand, that wasn't God carrying me. That was me carrying God. And to make it worse, when you saw those 2 sets of footprints in the sand, that wasn't you and God walking side by side. That was you walking and then going back to make a whole other set of footprints to pretend God was there. Both sets of footprints were yours. When you thought that was God, that was you speaking to yourself in a God voice. This is I was going to say the insanity of Christianity, but I won't be that harsh. I will say that was the delusion of Christianity. All right. And I appreciate this. Lady Tiger 51, I hope I'm reading that name right, says, I'm still kind of in the early stages of my deconstruction, but I'm sick of the mysteries of the gospel part. Wow. Yes. You told me to seek you and you're not giving me answers. It's like breadcrumbs into a forest, I think that's supposed to be. James says, Mother Teresa wrote to the Vatican and admitted she feels no God. She has seen no God. She has no connection to a God. Now, as a Christian, we would have said, of course not, Mother Teresa, because you're Catholic. And they wrote back and said that her doubt was a sign that her faith is right. Think about, that's what my sister said, right? She said, look, Lady Tiger talked about breadcrumbs. My sister said, in real life, when people break you down, tell you to worship them, and convince you to give them your daily bread, it's a play on words there. I think she's talking about money. Convince you to give them your daily bread so they can bless you with crumbs. They're called pimps. And that's what you're talking about there. All right. So, but the Bible's answer is different. The Bible's answer is not, oh, God is hiding and it's his fault. The Bible tries to make it seem like God did just a bang up job of revealing himself. So you go to Psalm 19 and it says, day unto day pours forth speech, night unto night. Every time day turns into night and then back into day, the sun and the moons and all that is speaking to you, telling you about God. Paul in Romans 1 compounds it and says, yo, from the things that are visible, you should know that there's someone who's not visible, who's responsible for all the visible things. So you can't say God is hiding. God has shown you himself in all the things you can see. And then Paul really puts the cap on it and says, so that men are without excuse. You know there's got to be a God, because how else are you going to explain boom, 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 sun, moon, stars, whatever? There's several problems with that. Psalm 19 and Romans 1 assumes that if you look up and if you see nature, you're going to do the math, hit the equal sign, and rightly arrive two things: rightly arrive at God and rightly arrive at the right God. Paul says you're going to be able to see from the things that are visible. You're going to be able to deduce from that God's divine nature and God's eternal power. And you think, oh, that makes sense, right? If I see things that are made and I can't figure out who was responsible, I'm going to hit the equal sign. I'm going to say there must be a God responsible for those things. Well, that's not necessarily true, because all throughout human history, people have looked up at these things that no man can take credit for, but they did not always do the math and arrive at a God. And if they did, it wasn't that they arrived at, oh, a God must have made it. Sometimes they arrived at the idea of, oh, those things must be the gods. So if Paul and Psalm 19, if they think God's not as hidden as y'all want to make him seem, atheist, because look at all the stuff that is, and people looked at the things that were, and they said, that sun that no one can take credit for, that sun must be God. So those people, if the Bible's right, those people didn't do the math and end up at, there must be a God outside of the sun. They thought the sun could be a God. They thought the lights and the stars were deities. So God's not doing a great job at, I'm not too hidden for you to get the right answer. He's not doing a good job at that, because people have looked at the stuff and got the wrong answer. They thought that those things were God, or they thought that those things just always existed. The Egyptians, in one of their creation narratives, they have a god called Atum, A-T-U-M. I don't know how you want to pronounce it, Atum. This god is synonymous with the seas. And it says that this God spoke himself into existence by uttering his own name. I write about this in my book, Let There Be Gaslight, chapter 8. He spoke himself into existence by uttering his own name. Now, you might think, now that's illogical. You'd have to exist to speak yourself into existence, which is contradictory. But however you want to blame them for getting the wrong answer, Psalm 19 and Romans 1, you cannot assume that people are going to look up at the things that are and derive from those things the right answer in your book, that there must be a God who's not those things. People have been getting the wrong answers, if the Bible's true, for eons, and there's no way to explain that. Now, here's what I will say to the atheist, to the agnostic person. I give a little grace to the theist because I understand what the theist is doing. Theism is not totally dead. You know why? Because human knowledge is not totally complete. But here's what religion does, and Christianity does this better than almost any religion. Christianity and religion, their bliss is human ignorance. They hide in all the knowledge gaps. Wherever there's a gap in our knowledge, that's where they stick God. And because there remains a few key mysteries, God lives. I'm an atheist. But I do think the concept of God gets to stay alive because there are gaps in our knowledge that God can exist in. So if we don't know, for instance, what came before the Big Bang, what was the state of reality before the universe began to expand. If we don't know that, there's still room to say, well, it could be a God. And you'll find honest atheists saying, I don't know that there's no God. I can't say that. But the question is not really, is there a God? The question is, what's responsible for our reality? And because we don't know that, there's room for God to hide there. The hiddenness of God can fit there. That's not the only mystery. The other mystery is life. How does life originate? Especially if you think at one point there was non-life. If you don't think that there was life in stars and life in chemicals and elements, and if there are not life in those things, how does chemistry become biology? How do you get life from non-life? And because there's mystery there, you can look up abiogenesis. This is people in the sciences trying to figure out how you get biology from chemistry. And they say, hey, we're not as clueless as we used to be, but because we still don't know the answer, God gets to hide there. There's another mystery, consciousness. What is consciousness? God gets to hide there. This is where the language of soul and spirit. What happens when we die? We don't know. Do you continue in some way, or is this the end of the show? Because we don't know, God gets to hide in these gaps. The bliss of religion is human ignorance. The more we learn, the more obsolete God becomes. There's so many things that we used to think God was the direct answer for that we now know, oh, this happens because of this. Oh, no, it wasn't. That happens because of that. So now God, if God's going to remain alive, God cannot be the direct answer. He has to be the indirect answer. Yes, this happens because of this, but God is responsible for that. Well, no, because now we know that that's caused by this. Oh, okay, well then God's responsible for that. God becomes more and more indirect the more we learn. And so smart money is on. If we keep learning, we're going to undo all the riddles, all the mysteries, all the religious ideas that tried to fill in those gaps. But still, we have the hiddenness of God in the Bible, where people are trying to tell us, no, these knowledge gaps, this is where God is trying to draw us out of ourselves, draw us to the end of ourselves, and show us, see, because you don't have this answer, then it must be God. This all leads me to the point of what we're talking about here. God, even if God exists, I'm going to argue that God does not want the glory. If God wanted the glory, I'm going to suggest that what you see, what we see in the human experience and human history, this is the most counterproductive, counterintuitive way to go about getting glory. Either God does not know what he wants, or he doesn't want glory. All right. So there's a story in the book of John. On my Facebook page, I said Matthew by mistake, and there's probably people roasting me right now saying, dummy, you thought it was Matthew, it was John. Okay, point taken, it was John. Go heard this guy, what's up, fam? John chapter 7, because when I say either God doesn't know what he wants or he doesn't want glory, somebody could just say, oh no, Brady, it seems counterintuitive to you because you're thinking like a human. And there's even a story where Jesus tells people they're thinking incorrectly. So I'll read the story in John chapter 7, right? Where I think Jesus lied. Yeah, y'all tell me if you think Jesus lies in this story. In John chapter 7, it says, after this, Jesus went about in Galilee. He would not go about in Judea because the Jews were seeking to kill him. Now, we can stop right there. Maybe I'll come back and do a whole episode on this. If the Jews were seeking to kill him, why was he avoiding them if his whole mission was to come and die? Does it matter how he dies? He could have been poisoned and still have died for the sins of the world. He didn't have to be crucified. So why are you avoiding and evading death if your mission is to die? However you die, you still die. Whatever. Um, so he's going about in Galilee. He would not go about in Judea because the Jews were seeking to kill him, and we can't have Jesus dying. Now the Jews' feast of booths was at hand. Uh, so his brothers, his physical brothers, according to this story, his biological brothers, blood brothers, um, his brothers said to him, "Yo, man, leave here and go to Judea. Like, why are you hiding here? What you hanging out here for? Leave here and go to," this is verse 3, John chapter 7, verse 3. "Leave here and go to Judea, that your disciples may also see you the works you're doing." I keep checking at the chat because I'm trying to see if the voice is staying on point. So help me out with that. Go to Judea so that your disciples can see the works that you're doing. For no one works in secret if he wants to be known openly. So they're questioning him, why are you hiding? In a minute, we're going to apply this to God overall, not just Jesus here on earth. Why are you hiding? Nobody who wants to be known stays hidden like this. If you do these things, show yourself to the world. And this is what people like me are saying. Show yourself. You want to be known? Show yourself to the world. But then John, or the writer of John here, adds commentary, for not even his brothers believed him. So they were trying to get him to go show himself to the world because even they themselves were like, yo, do something to let us know what's really good. Now look what Jesus says here. My time has not yet come, but your time is always here. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify about it that its works are evil. You go up to the feast. I am not going up to the feast, for my time has not yet fully come. After saying this, he remained in Galilee. But after his brothers had gone up to the feast, then he also went up, not publicly, but in private. Let me know in the chat, did Jesus lie? When I was a Christian, I'm sure you probably had your ways of doing this as well. When I was a Christian, I would say, no, Jesus didn't lie. He said, my time hadn't come, meaning he didn't say I'm not going. He meant I'm not going right now. I'm not going to go with y'all. Y'all go. And then when he went later, he was still telling the truth because he didn't go when they wanted him to go. He went when he wanted to go. I'm stuck on Jesus saying, I'm not going to the feast. I'm not going. Later, he goes. To me, that's a lie. But we're not going to spend too much time on that. My real issue is, do you want to be known or not? God, that's a simple question. Do you want to be known? I want to show something to you guys. Let me see. Where's it at? Which one do I want to show first? I'll show you two maps. These are maps of the distribution of religion in the world. All right. I think I'm going to put it on the desktop first. I'm sorry. Give me a second to put it on the desktop. Open. This is how religion has shaped out over the span of history and geography. All right, here goes the first one. This one is not too detailed. I don't even know if I can see it. It's so small. I'll do it on my phone that way. You guys can see that. Let me know if it's too small for you. All right, just so you know, if you can't see it, the red is Buddhism, the purple is Christianity, the orange is Hinduism, the yellowish, if you can even see it on this map, it's so small, is indigenous, Green is Islam. Blue is Judaism. The light purple, you can find those small specks of light purple, non-religious, and then the kind of aqua color is other. All right. This is how religion is shaped out in the world. Now, granted, not everybody in the purple is Christian. The purple just means it's the dominant religion. Not everybody in the green is Islamic. Just that's the dominant religion. Not everybody in the orange is Hindu. That's just the dominant religion. So you've got mixtures in there, but those are the dominant religions. There's another map. Let me show you this other one. That's even more detailed. And I think that's this one. Nope, that's this one. And I can't even read the legend, it's so small, but this, it shows you a little more how dispersed the religious worldviews are. If God wanted to be known, if God wanted the glory, if God was doing all the things that are happening in the earth, whether it be saving people from car crashes or letting people get in car crashes, whether it be rescuing people from earthquakes or killing people in earthquakes, whether it be having an army win a battle or having an army lose a battle, whatever it is, whether it be beautiful mountain picturesque scenes and sunsets, or whether it be natural disasters, if everything that's happening, right, whether it be God revealing himself through the person of Jesus Christ, or whether it be an angel giving the Prophet Muhammad the words of God, whatever it is that God is doing, if God really wanted the glory, do you think that the dispersion of religious beliefs would be this varied throughout the world? Does this look like a God who really wants the glory? What do you think? This looks like a God who some kind of way gets his divine jollies from remaining unknown, from remaining hidden, from allowing confusion and questions to persist. This doesn't look like I want glory. This looks like I want gory. Like I want the opposite of glory. When I was in ministry as a Christian, I used to use, and maybe you have some kind of, maybe you can identify with this. I used to say, like, I remember back when I was younger, right? When my mother, like, she used to go out to choir rehearsal on Thursday nights and Bible study on Wednesday nights. And as a kid, I used to like those times when my mom was gone. And when she was gone, I used to like enjoy it so much that somewhere in my mind, you probably did this as a kid too, somewhere in my mind, I used to think to myself, not like, I never thought, Mom, if you ever see this, I'm sorry for thinking it. I never wanted any harm to come to my mom, but I did used to think like, yo, I just wish she wouldn't like stay gone. We got the house to ourselves. There's nobody telling us to go to bed. Nobody telling us to finish our homework. Nobody telling us we got to come inside at a certain time. I used to be like, yo, I wish it could stay like this, where the lights could stay on, the heat could stay on, nobody's evicting us, and food can stay in the refrigerator, but just mom not being home. Right? If you were a kid, you probably had thoughts like that. But inevitably at some point in time, Mom, this is where you can like hopefully like come back and hug me again. Because the later and later it got in the evening, I was expecting her to come back home at 9. Now it's 9:30. Now it's 9:48. And now I'm not saying to my sisters like, yo, should we worry? But I'm looking around like this ain't good. Like at first I wanted Mom gone. I still wanted all the stuff to stay on, like the lights and the food and all, but I just wanted her gone. As a Christian, I used to say that's how we deal with God. We want God to be gone, but we want all his stuff to still be here. We want the lights to stay on. We want the sun and we want food and safety and all that. And I used to try to guilt people into like, that's not cool to want God's stuff, but not want God. And I used to compare it to me and my mother. But as the evening went on and it got later and later, some part of me started getting worried, like maybe something happened to mom. Like, is mom okay? Like, now it's 10 o'clock. She's still not home. Do I call my aunts? What do I do? And I realized, like, man, okay, forget what I said earlier. I don't want her to stay gone. I want her to come home. I want her to come home. And I used to try to guilt the people that I was preaching to, like, does humanity ever have a sense where they say, okay, I used to think it was okay for God to be gone, but now I'm worried. Like, I don't want God's stuff without God. Just like as a kid, I came to my senses and said, I don't want my mom's stuff without my mom. Does humanity ever say, sorry, God, we were wrong. We don't want your stuff without you. We hope you're okay wherever you are. Come back, come back, come back. And then when my mother would eventually come home, I would be relieved and I would hug her and I wouldn't tell her like, oh man, I was worried. But, there was some kind of catharsis when she came back. But what catharsis is there for humanity, for the people who are seeking God, who say, man, I thought I wanted your stuff without you, but now, nah, this ain't too cool. Where you at? Where's the catharsis? When does God ever come home and say, oh, you missed me, or I'm sorry I hid myself from you, or you found me? Like, not you found me and it looks like this or this, but you found me and it looks like, no, we really did find God. Like, where's his compassion? Where's his, man, I miss them. Man, I don't want them to feel like I'm going. A Christian apologist used to say this, and I never knew what they meant when I was a Christian. I didn't get it until I became an unbeliever. Christian apologists used to say, there's no free lunch. And what they meant by that was, in this vast universe of stars exploding and comets zooming and planets and empty space that's not quite empty and dark matter and dark energy and all this chaos, beautiful chaos, there's an earth where everything's just right for life to exist and us to breathe the air and not choke on it and have food and have happiness. And Christian apologists used to say, you mean to tell me you think in all this vastness of the universe, you get an earth in this habitable zone just by chance? They would say there's no free lunch. Someone's got to pay for this meal. This doesn't just happen. Like, a free meal, that's amazing. Like, come on, somebody's just going to give me no. This life is not free. There's a God that we owe a duty and responsibility to know and to worship and to seek and all that. There's no free lunch. Well, I'm kind of ready to call bullshit on that, because though we don't know all the answers, for a God to remain hidden yet claim, I want the glory, it doesn't add up. So much that I begin to wonder, maybe this isn't the only habitable place in the entire universe. Who knows, right? If it is, to me, that's more like, damn, that's uncanny. But we don't know that to be the case. But if God set this entire thing up because he wants glory, but won't reveal himself because somehow revealing himself is going to equal less glory, like it's just not time for you to reveal yourself yet. Well, when is time? Well, when you die, then you'll see. That's when you're going to reveal yourself? For you, any time is right. For me, the time hasn't come yet. Well, when are you going to do it? When it's too late, when you can no longer, I'm not taking faith when you die, because at that point, then you'll see. Now, I want you to believe now. Okay, well, if I believe now, the world looks like this. Everybody believes something different. But you want us to do it by faith because you want the glory? I'll never forget my cousin, right? My cousin did something that I tried to copy, and it worked out really well for my cousin. It worked out terribly for me. This is back when I was a young boy. I used to ride around the city with my cousin. And we were hanging out at one of his friends' house one night. It was me, my cousin, two of his male friends, and then like three women. I was around 14, which means my cousin had to be around 20, 19 or 20. We're hanging out, and one of the girls asked my cousin, "What kind of car do you drive?" And I'm waiting for my cousin to like flex. And all my cousin said was, "I drive a Chevy." And I'm like, "No, like, tell him what you drive." So at the time, this is like 19, had to be like 1991, maybe 1990, 91. My cousin drove a, let me see if I can find the image and show you. My cousin drove a Chevy Cavalier Z24. Boom. All right, I'm gonna pull it up here. Let's see if you can appreciate. It's not going to look too stunning because it's 2025. Which version do I want? I want the 90. I almost don't even want to put it on the screen because you're not going to be able to appreciate how stunning this car was at the time. But I will. I'll wait. Where'd it go? How can I make this full screen? Every time I try to make it full screen, it disappears. Sorry, y'all. Thought I was going to be able to do this quickly. All right, I'll just put this on the screen and then maybe you'll be able to appreciate. Share screen. All this is going to make it seem so kind of like, let me see, share screen. It's going to be anticlimactic, I promise you. Sorry. But yeah, this was it. The Chevy Cavalier Z24. You probably can't even appreciate it. It's probably so small. Let me see how it looks on y'all end. Y'all can't even see it. Damn, sorry. I'm trying to make it full screen, but it won't. Every time I click on the actual image, it does something I'm trying to not get it to do. I'm trying to make it show up here, and it actually just won't. That's as close as I can get to making it. Hold on, here we still not full screen. Anyway, sorry for the anticlimactic nature of this story, but sorry. Anyway, the girls are asking him like, "Yo, what do you drive?" He says a Chevy. Back in those days, Chevys did not look too spectacular, but he drove a Chevy Cavalier Z24, which was like a sports version of the Chevy Cavalier. And I'm like, "Yo, tell him what you drive." And he wouldn't tell him. So as we're leaving, we're all out on the porch and we go get in the car. And I'm like, damn, I'm thinking to myself, my cousin missed an opportunity to flex on these girls if he would have but it didn't dawn on me that by saying Chevy Cavalier Z24, they would not have had an image of what the car looks like. They wouldn't have been able to appreciate it. So he almost would have been playing himself by saying what he drove because they still wouldn't have got it. It would have just been a weirder sounding Chevy. But here it was, we go out to the car, we go get in the car and they're all watching. And we go get in the car and you can see on their faces, they're like, damn, he said a Chevy, but he didn't say he drove that. And he peels out and skirts down the street in this Chevy. And I said, damn, by not revealing what it was and making them have to wait and actually see it, he actually set them up for the reveal. I was like, damn, that's a cool way to the methodology was so smooth there. I was like, I get it now. I get it. He flexed. So he couldn't tell him. He had the flex on him. And so I tried that, not with a car, just with myself. All right, there was this chick back in the day, and if you're offended by the word chick, I'm sorry. My sisters say chick, and so I feel like it's cool to say it. There was a girl back in the day named Brooke, one of the most beautiful girls. I was interested in her, and I finally talked this girl Brooke into letting me take her to the movies. I was like, yo, meet me down at the Gallery, which is a mall in Center City, Philadelphia. Meet me at the Gallery. I'm gonna take you to the movies. Da 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 da. This is back before cell phones, so we're talking on the phone. It's like 19, I don't know, 88, 89, 90, somewhere in there, probably 91. Actually, I was 92 because my cousin had the 92 Z24. So this was 92. I was going to try to do what my cousin did. So I said, yo, I'm going to take you to the movie. She agreed. That was a week prior to the date. The day before, there was no way to set up the kind of situation that my cousin had with these girls asking what kind of car you drive. So in order for me to impress her with the reveal, I had to do some kind of way to downplay something so that I could reveal a greater glory. So I was like, yo, I hope you don't mind. It was the day before we were going to the movies. I called up. I said, yo, I hope you don't mind. I haven't had a haircut in like 2 weeks. And like I was saying, all these things to make myself, to dim my shine, to dim my glory, to make her expectations lower, so that when she actually saw me, because I just got a fresh cut, I had to, I was ready. But she didn't know any of that. So I had to make her expectations lower so that when she saw me, the glory could be that much brighter. And I think I did too good of a job, because on the day that we were supposed to meet, I went downtown to meet her and she never showed up. And I was kicking myself because, like, damn, I think I made it seem too embarrassing. So much so that had she shown up, she would have saw me in all my glory and she would have been like, I get it, all you. But I made it seem so terrible that she was like, I'm not going to be seen with you. She never showed up. If you're an Office fan, you probably already know there's a perfect parallel. The Office, right? This character here, Andy Bernard. This character, Andy, at one time, he was the boss. He wasn't the original boss. He was an employee, a very lackluster employee. Then the original boss left, and somehow Andy became the boss. Then he lost that position. And it was like, damn, what's going to happen to Andy? Some kind of way he worked some magic with this guy here, David, who was like the owner of the company, not just the regional manager. This guy, David, was the owner. Andy was the regional manager. Andy worked it out so that he could get his regional manager position back, but nobody in the company knew it. So Andy, he said, I'm gonna flex on him. So Andy came in one day and he said, yo, can I just get a job back as the janitor? And so they let him come be the janitor, but they didn't know he had already talked to this guy, David, to become the regional manager again. So they all think he's just a janitor. He comes in dressed as a janitor, mopping the rug. He spills soup on himself. He made himself look so like just disheveled that his girlfriend, Erin, pulls him to the side and says, yo, I know what you're planning. You're planning this big reveal. But she says to him, just remember, these people who are seeing you as this janitor, spilling soup on yourself and mopping the rug, she said, these people are going to have to still see you when you become manager again. And she said, some images are hard to forget. And she said to him, calibrate. You're making yourself look too bad here. And then when they finally reveal that he's going to be manager, now all of a sudden, like, he's flexing again, and he underneath his manager, underneath his janitor suit, he had a manager suit. So when the big reveal came, he took off the janitor clothes, and underneath he had a suit on, and he revealed, like, oh, I'm really that bull. Like, why am I saying all that? I'm saying all this to say, I don't think Bible God or any God has really calibrated the situation. If what you want from humanity is glory, and to get your glory, you've got to make yourself seem like such a shitty boss, such a non-existent, or at least non-caring, non-feeling God. Just before I got on, I saw a news report of a 10-year-old girl who was killed in her sleep. She was home sleeping. There was a storm, and a tree fell on her house, killed her. Her mom and aunt, same house, they ended up having to go to the hospital. They survived, but they were hurt too. And then you go underneath it and you see the comments underneath, and all the comments underneath are prayers for the family. Oh God, this, God, da, da, da. The same God who allows a tree to smash the 10-year-old, now you're having to pray to, and it's some kind of way you're going to glorify. Like, Andy spilled soup on his janitor suit, and his girlfriend said, yo, calibrate. People still gotta look at you when you become manager again. And they're gonna have to remember all these images. Like, don't play yourself too much. Is anybody in heaven pulling God's coattails saying, yo, calibrate? Like, I know you want them to worship you forever, but they're going to have to, they're going to remember the time that you allowed them to suffer this, and the time that you allow this war and this plague and this tragedy and this person to get sexually assaulted and this. Calibrate. You can't prove to me that a God wants glory when he allows the religious map of the world to look like this, when he allows the suffering of the world to look like it looks. The only reason why suffering and evil is a problem is because of the hiddenness of God. The hiddenness of God convinces me there cannot be a God who wants glory from any of this. And I struggle to see a glorious God, or a God who wants glory, doing any of these things. So all that is my challenge to the Christian. How does this equal glory for God? How is God not playing himself? To the person who's on the fence, I know there are plenty of people who watch this podcast because you're you're deconstructing, and you're trying to figure out how far you're going to go. How much latitude do you give God to downplay his glory just so that he could set up the glorious reveal? How much latitude does the deity get? How long before you say, nah, this doesn't look like a God just hiding. This looks like humans trying to come up with an ideology for why the things that we don't like happen, the things that we wish would happen don't, and then sometimes they do. And so we're going to tell a story as to why that might be. Like, how much longer do you give? Like, when I was a kid, how long was I willing to wait for my mom to come home before I was like, yo, chalk it, like something happened? Typically, she would get home 10:30, and the reason was because my mother was a great conversator. She would sit around after choir rehearsal, after Bible, talking to people, and maybe sometimes she didn't drive. She was getting a ride home, so maybe the person she was riding with had to drop off 3 other people. She would get home around 10:30, sometimes late 11. It was never the next day, but we didn't have cell phones, so nobody could call. She couldn't call, but hey, I got hung up. So we just had to wonder and worry until she arrived. What's holding up God? He's not hindered by the lack of technology to say, hey, here's what's taking so long. And of course, the Bible will tell you God's waiting for the full number of Gentiles to come in. So maybe that's what the holdup is. But in the meantime, why so silent? Why so distant? Why downplay? Why so downplay your power and your compassion that you let the world look the way it looks? If you're really as glorious as you want us to believe, you shouldn't have to turn the lights down just so that your shine looks that much more shiny. You shouldn't have to make the world darker just so that we could praise you for your light. This to me says then that's probably not what's really going on. It's not a hidden God just wanting us to search for him. There's no God. As far as we know, we're all we have. We grow in our knowledge, and as we grow in our knowledge, we check off what we used to think God was responsible for. We help each other out as much as we can because we know that sometimes we're going to be the one helping and sometimes we're going to be the one needing. We're advancing to the pace that we can advance at, but because we're frail and we're fragile and we're limited, we're not always going to get everything right, and we're going to have to rethink some things, and we're going to have to apologize for some things, and we're going to have to try to get a redo on some things or a mulligan. This is the story. I'm more interested in that story than the one that religion tells. And if you think there's a good reason why we should keep giving God time and grace and latitude to set up this big, glorious reveal, tell us why you think we should keep doing it. Because I don't see the benefit of that. All right, that's all I got. Came in at under an hour, and apparently no technical difficulties today. So here's what I tried to do. I decided to not go back and forth switching from one camera to the other because I got a feeling that information switching was what was confusing the mic. And if there were no glitches today, that might be the issue. I might just have to pick one mic per episode and stick to it. But if you're not a Patreon supporter, sign up where I guess I'll go ahead and tell you guys. So the movie that we're going to be watching on May 18th is Sinners. And when I say we're not going to be watching, we're going to be reacting to it. So you have at least the next week and a half to go see Sinners. And then if you're a Patreon supporter on May 18th, we're going to be doing we're going to be recording our reaction to the movie. We might even do it live, but we're definitely going to record it on May 18th. So, yep, sign up on the Patreon. That link will be in the description of the video. Once again, thank you guys for rocking with the channel. Shout out to these folks. And I will catch you this Thursday. Probably going to do a Life After Faith episode. I got several folks lining up to tell their testimonies. If you have a story that you want to tell about how you came to faith and then you realize that, no, that was actually a bad move, and you no longer believe, and you want to tell that story, hit me up on Facebook, Brady Fanatic Goodwin, Phanotik Goodwin on Facebook. Shoot me a message on Messenger and we can talk about it. All right, y'all, enjoy your day. Love, logic, light. Spread it, share it, and I'll get with you on the next one. Peace.